Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, busy man like everybody is who covers college football that is underway and full throttle this weekend. Sam, thank you for your time. And the games tonight in the Big 12, Kansas should win easily. Obviously, Utah should win easily. What about that game, the intriguing game with Colorado, who you would think has too much, but North Dakota State being that's a tough non-conference opponent?
Yeah, no doubt. It's one that you don't really want to mess around with. If you're Colorado, you probably want to jump early and get an early lead and take control of that. Me personally, I think Colorado will handle business pretty well tonight. They've done a really good job this offseason adding talent. I thought what they did to upgrade their offensive line was superb. A lot of really good players along the front there. And to me, that's the biggest thing for Colorado this year. They've got to do a better job of predicting to Shedeur Sanders, because that was the one thing that if you look at last year, there was a lot of issues last year. Defensively, they had some issues as well. But I think if there's one thing you could point to that they really needed to fix, it was protecting the quarterback. Because when they do, they've got legitimate high-end skill talent at the offensive skill positions. And I love some of the guys they added this year, some of the guys they got back. But I think of a guy like LeJontay Wester, the punt returner and dynamite receiver. I think he's going to be fun to watch. And I think Colorado will handle business tonight. But like North Dakota State's a program. If you let them hang around, they might pop you.
Sam, when you look across the rest of the Big 12 this week, there's not a lot outside of West Virginia and Penn State that'll grab you. So when you watch these games, what do you watch for when Kansas is playing Lindenwood or something like that?
Yeah, I want to see first, are you dominant? Are you dominating the opponents you're supposed to? Because that to me is the first sign of an alarm, is if you are not taking care of business against a team that you have way more talent than. Procedurally, are you operating cleanly? Do you have a lot of self-inflicted wounds? Are you putting the ball on the ground? Are you having penalties that are unforced, pre-snap penalties, things like that? And then obviously just basic execution. Like, are you executing the offense? Obviously, a lot of these game plans are going to be fairly vanilla on both sides of the ball, especially if you're really overmatched over your opponent. But I want to see in those situations, especially for your newer players, guys who are stepping in to roles for the first time, whether it's a new quarterback or a new starter at a key position, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Are you executing at a high level? Those are kind of the things I look for, because if you're having issues now against an opponent that you're way better than, then what does that mean for the future?
Sam, I know that Houston's not expecting to be very good this year, but there's an excitement at least because they know it's new and that they're building. But I've been seeing a lot of Donovan Smith NFL type of talk here lately. He's obviously got, the NFL background with his father. He's got great size and skills. Turns the ball over too much. But just kind of what in general do you hear about Donovan Smith and kind of the expectation for him this year coming off of an injury?
Yeah, they like him because he's a really big, strong guy who's got a really good arm and is mobile, can move around. He's smart. He's a leader. Even at the old stop at Texas Tech, they spoke really highly of him. And I don't think they wanted him to go. I think Joey McGuire would have been happy for him to stay, but he wanted to be fair to Donovan and let him know, hey, your chances to start, you can't guarantee a starting job to him, because they had Baron Morton there as well, and they still had Tyler Shuck when Donovan left. So Donovan wanted to seek an opportunity to be a full-time starter. He got that at Houston. He took it on the chin a little bit last year, but the whole Houston team did. I think they really struggled last year in a way that I think they didn't expect. But now that he's kind of settled in and they've got a new system, a new coaching staff, I think he's got a real chance to take off. I really didn't think when I watched them last year, I didn't think Donovan Smith was the problem with that team. There were a lot of other issues beyond that at Houston. I think Donovan, if he's got a very sound structure around him and you protect, I think he's got really high potential. I don't know that I want to say he's a day one draft pick, but I do think, could I see him playing at the next level with his physical gifts? Absolutely.
You and Pete Sampson wrote a combo piece in theathletic.com about the Notre Dame game, top 10 team against 22nd ranked A&M. Kyle Field, I've been there for games. We all have in some ways, but I mean, it's just different. But obviously they need to win the game. But your thoughts about what Notre Dame will face and just the anticipation for a game one between these two teams?
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating because the game to me is going to be won or lost when Notre Dame has the ball. When they're on offense with this offensive line that they have that's got 2 freshmen and 3 sophomores on it. They've got 6 combined starts in Kyle Field with 106,000 people screaming their heads off. And oh, by the way, a really talented defensive line with guys like Shamar Turner and Nick Scorton and some of the transfers they've added. I really think this is going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Like, you got a true freshman starting at left tackle. That's asking a lot for Notre Dame to be able to ask your young left tackle to handle that environment on the road for your college debut. But I do think Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, thought it was a good hire. I think he'll be smart. They'll probably get Riley Leonard moving around. They probably will do their best to not put their line in compromising situations, make him mobile, make things easy on them, and kind of weather the storm early on. But it's a challenge because this is a Mike Elko coach team. We're going to see them at A&M for the first time, but we've seen what his defenses look like at A&M, and certainly have saw what they played like at Duke. And I expect that A&M is going to be a pretty good defensive team this year, and I think that things could get really interesting, especially if you see a lot of struggles early on for Notre Dame.
Sam, what would you say would surprise people as a maybe a hidden strength of A&M that they're not expecting this year?
I think probably the receiver in the passing game, because that they've had so many talented receivers, and of course some of them left. They lost Evan Stewart to the portal. I think they still have really good talent there. Noah Thomas, I really like. They brought Ja'Day Walker back. Cyrus Allen, the transfer. You hear a lot of good things about him so far in his development. And with Wegman, if he's healthy, which he is, he's 100%. I heard Mike Elko say the other day, he's clear. He's good to go. And if they can keep him upright, I think that passing game can be pretty explosive. I think that they may not have someone who's got the name value or the explosiveness that Evan Stewart did, but I think they still got plenty of talent over there. And the biggest question for me with them is they've got to get better running the ball. Last year they struggled in that area. They were one of the lower end Power 5 teams in terms of running the ball. And that's one thing that Colin Klein did really well at K-State. K-State was one of the best running teams. They're real creative in their run looks. But again, that's another question mark because they lost Reuben Owens. They do have some depth back there with Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels. So they've got guys back there, but I'm really curious to see how that develops and how quickly they adapt to what Colin Klein wants to do schematically in that offense.
Sam, where will you be? I know you're going to travel, and sometimes you'll watch like we all do, either at a game or somewhere else. Where will you be? What's your travel schedule like?
I will be at Notre Dame, Texas A&M this weekend, so I'll get the Saturday night game. I'll be chilling up until about then, so I'll probably hang out at home and watch on the couch until about 1 o'clock, and then I'll get on the road and head to College Station and try to beat the traffic a little bit down there. But I'll be there at Kyle Field on Saturday night.
Hell of an atmosphere, 100,000 plus, probably 106 to 8,000 will be at that game.
Sam, I went to the first 2 or 3 times they played in the Cotton Bowl when I was a kid. And I kind of felt like A&M and Notre Dame had played a lot more, but this is only the 6th meeting between the two. And the first 3 in particular in the Cotton Bowl were all epic. This is something I'd kind of like to see A&M and Notre Dame do more often, just because I think that whenever they play, it seems to be super fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I guess the last time they played was 2001. So it's been a long time. But from in the late 80s, early 90s, all 5 of their previous battles are between 88 and 2001. So that's why it feels like you. I grew up, I remember seeing them play either in bowl games or early September game. And so that was a usual thing. And R.C. Slocum's teams back then were pretty good. And Notre Dame obviously was still a national title contender especially in the early 90s. And so you had a really good A&M program and a nationally relevant Notre Dame going at it. And so there was some really good battles back then. But yeah, it's been 23 years since they played. So I think it's going to be fun. And the fun thing about this game too, to me, is that in this new playoff era, nobody necessarily is eliminated, but you can really put a good resume builder right here on your schedule. So if you're Notre Dame, you're Marcus Freeman, you really kind of get out in front of things on a big pressure year where I think they really need one. They really need to break through in year 3 under Freeman and get to the playoffs. So you get this game because you look at the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, it's not super impressive. So I think this is a really good benchmark game for them. And then you look at A&M, I don't think it's in the world they lose, but if they win, you kind of look at the next few weeks, it's kind of manageable. And they don't have Alabama. They don't have Ole Miss. They don't have Georgia. And they get all their other ranked teams at home. So whoever wins this game is going to be in a pretty good position going forward based on how their schedule lays out.
Sam, any thoughts on the Big 12's pursuit of UConn? The stunted edition is, something that makes this a little bit more interesting and probably confusing, for some that it wouldn't all be right away. But, there's obviously a lot of moving parts here. Do you gather really anything from people you've talked to, or do you have any sort of a strong feeling on, this attempt to try and, expand further?
I'm just going to say this, man. Get you a friend who loves you the way Brett Yormark loves UConn.
I'm saying, man, yeah.
I mean, this thing I feel like is not going to go away until it actually gets done, because it seems like he is very laser focused on it. And like you guys, I'm sure have heard, there's not a consensus in the league to make this happen. So it's up to him to kind of whip the votes together and get it across the finish line. I'm not a huge fan of it, kind of for the same reasons Paul was talking about earlier. I kind of like UConn in the Big East, especially as a basketball program. And I like that the Big East, when the old football league crumbled, that they brought all those brands back together in basketball, because that's what college sports really should be. It should be a lot of like-minded institutions that are close to each other geographically, that have some rivalries and some similar culture and things like that, and have them play together. And not to say that UConn would be an asset to the Big 12. I think it would be, certainly in basketball. Football, not so much, but they have, I mean, once upon a time they did play in a BCS Bowl, but gosh, that was so long ago. I just don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze, in my opinion. But I understand why they're interested in them, because of the basketball brand and the emphasis that Brett puts on that. And also because, where they're located, geography obviously doesn't seem to matter anymore in realignment. So if you're able to get further and further and go coast to coast, as Brett Yormark has said he wants to go, I understand it in that way. I'm just not a huge fan of it. But I'm not a huge fan of a lot of these realignment moves. Like the fact that Cal and Stanford are in the ACC is also ridiculous. So it's not for me, but I understand why they're doing it. And I think it's just kind of not going to go away. Also, I'll say this. Can we stop doing this right before the season? I hate this. I feel like every single year since 2021, when the Texas and Oklahoma thing happened, we have the realignment stuff going on right before the season. And it's time to talk about games, not talk about this nonsense.
Now, I agree.
Amen.
With you. That's what Craig said earlier this week about it before the season. And it just becomes a topic, but at the same time kind of annoying. You, Manny Navarro, and Bruce Feldman did a combo piece about a week ago about the top transfers. As I'm going through that list last week, the names of players who could win a Heisman Trophy and all, I mean, it is unbelievable, the names who have gone from one school to the other, sometimes because of, like, for example, DeBoer to Alabama. So, but good God, you'll see Riley Leonard on Saturday. You'll see the defensive lineman from Purdue that went to A&M on Saturday. It's unbelievable, the names of the players that are a part of that list.
You could make an All-America team out of the portal guys, the guys who transferred. Like Dominic Williams, who went from TCU to Oklahoma. He started all 27 games at TCU and a national championship game against Georgia. I mean, you're talking former 5-stars. You're talking Quinshon Judkins, who was a freshman All-American. Cam Ward, who was a tremendous talent at Incarnate Word, then Washington State. And I think he could really lift Miami this year. It was a really fun list to put together. A lot of intrigue, and just we try to really find out too, not just who are the big names that move, but who has really performed well since they've been on campus, because not every transfer hits. Some of them get there and maybe they're going to end up being a backup or rotational guy. Maybe they're not going to break out, or maybe they're not what that staff thought they were going to be when they finally get there. So we try to get as much intel as we could about how these guys are really doing and who's going to break out. And I'm fascinated. That is one cool thing. As much as I know that the movement doesn't always enamor the fans, it does add an interesting element, and it adds some intriguing storylines like the Riley Leonard, Mike Elko thing that makes it gives another layer for us to follow as we watch these games.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com. Thank you very much. Look forward to it. I know, depending on what your schedule is and what you're writing, we'll have you on Thursdays. Can't wait. Appreciate your time, buddy. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports.